Some of you may remember an incident from 2010 where a ship from South Korea, the Cheonan, was sunk, costing the lives of 46 young crewmen. At the time, given the proximity of the ship to North Korean waters, it was assumed that the DPRK had actually sunk the ship via a submarine torpedo. However, the head of the Ministry of Defense in the country, Kim Tae-young, actually said that it seemed more likely that it had been destroyed by a sea mine left over from the Korean War. North Korea brought in about 4,000 sea mines from the Soviet Union during the Korean War and placed about 3,000 of them in the West Sea and the East Sea. We searched for and removed them in 1959 and 1984, but it would have been impossible to retrieve all of them. He also added that it seemed more likely that the explosion came from the outside, as the injuries of crewmen didn't fit in an internal explosion which would have had burns and the like. Instead, they suffered spinal injuries from an immediate shock from the outside, and also said that surviving radar crew members said that they did not see anything incoming, nor did they detect any torpedoes coming towards their position. Nearly a month later, the South Korean government under Myung-bak suddenly declared that the ship had been attacked by a DPRK submarine. This was backed by a US-led international investigation team, which reported to the United Nations that a North Korean 130-ton Romeo-class submarine fired a 1.7-ton mid-sized CHT-02D torpedo and sunk the Republic of Korea's Cheonan. Now, all these years later, the truth is starting to finally come out, thanks to the efforts of two researchers who've been looking into this situation and have determined it's more likely that the Cheonan was hit by a rogue submarine, which is something a lot of investigators and a lot of experts have said for some time. Dr. Myung-bak, a researcher at the University of Cambridge in England, and Kim Hwang-soo, a professor of physics at Kongsung University in Korea, put together a scientific explanation using an analysis of acoustic and vibration readings. In their words, a spectra of the seismic signals recorded on the day of the incident from Baekhyang Island, near where the incident took place, and it contains data enabling them to put together an unbiased analysis of what happened. Their findings are actually consistent with a previous documentary that had been produced in South Korea called the Project Cheonan ship, which actually said that it used thermal VOD cameras that recorded no explosion whatsoever, or the heat signature that would be expected from that. Now, this documentary was slated to be released in 2013, but due to pressure from pro-government protesters, it was forced out of theaters after the creators were threatened. According to the doctor and researchers' analysis, the recorded seismic data not only backs this up, but unveils a devastating truth. The data indicates that there was not only a collision, but that the object that hit the Cheonan was consistent with the natural frequencies and vibrations of a large submarine with a length of around 113 meters. Now, at the time of the incident, South Korea was involved with war games with the United States. The operation was called Key Resolve Full Eagle, in which tens of thousands of troops from both countries were actively engaged in practice against supposedly an attack from the DPRK. Now, while this was taking out, there were dozens and dozens of ships, many of them using radar, sonar, and satellite tracking means. The idea that some kind of covert sub could have snuck its way in, waited for the proper opportunity to shoot down a South Korean ship seems extremely unlikely. An explanation that's been offered is to claim that the DPRK is crazy, based of course on all the false information that has previously been given about them and the circular logic behind it. Even if it was assumed that this submarine that crashed into the Cheonan was a North Korean submarine, they would also be wrong. The largest known DPRK manufactured submarine is 67 meters. The largest submarine in their arsenal is about 20 Romeo-class submarines, which are 76 meters. However, U.S. nuclear-powered subs, on the other hand, are a totally different class range. Ballistic and guided missile subs, or boomers, are massive, almost the length of 2 football fields, like the USS Ohio, which was first docked in Busan in South Korea in 2008. But the smaller SSN fast attack subs are the ones more regularly found docked around the Western Pacific. They come in 3 types: the outdated Cold War Seawolf, the new Virginias, of which there were only 10 ever built as of last year, and the backbone of the subfleet, made famous by Tom Clancy in The Hunt for Red October, the Los Angeles, its length, 110 meters. It is said that there are 3 Los Angeles-class submarines currently in use, none of them stationed permanently in Japan, which means they would have been floating around the Korean area at the time of the incident. Now, these SSNs are subject to regular maintenance just like every other ship is. Now, there is a website where one can actually go and look at the records of ships that have docked and the amount of time that repairs have been spent on them. Potentially from this, we can gauge if they were involved in key resolve full Eagle exercises and what type of maintenance they had. Unfortunately, the only problem is that the subs have detailed records and others don't. So if the rogue sub we're looking for needed to be fixed at the Pearl Harbor Naval Shipyard after a collision with the Cheonan, the record may not show it, especially if publicly the Navy wanted to cover it up. The record does, however, show that the Buffalo in October 2008 pulled into Busan for a routine port call in conjunction with the International Fleet Review. Then, a year later, in December 2009, something unusual happened. After only about 4 months on the job, the normally highly competent commander of the sub was fired due to a loss of confidence in his ability to command. Normally the Commodore, who fired him, facing drastically decreased funding and personnel shortages at the time, would have required a serious breach of protocol or major incident to have done what he did. The second sub, the Houston, which embarrassingly unnoticed leaked radioactive material for 2 years in February 2010, arrived in the Philippines for a scheduled port visit. The next entry is in November, saying that it was in Chinhae, South Korea, for a routine port call. Nothing in between. So either prior to or after the Cheonan sunk, both subs visited South Korea, but there's no record of them participating in the 2010 Key Resolve Full Eagle exercises. In fact, there's no mention of them ever being involved, which is extremely irregular to say the least, as the sub-squadron 15 key responsibility is to support every Pacific Fleet operation in the area. With the 2010 exercise being one of the largest simulated war exercises in the world, including a number of anti-sub operations, not having at least one of their subs there would have been incomprehensible. The other sub, the city of Corpus Christi, is also strangely never mentioned as being a part of the exercises, but an anomaly has been found. Just a matter of weeks after the Cheonan sinking, in mid-April 2010, the sub just happened to pull into Pearl Harbor Naval Shipyard for its upkeep maintenance. Now, normally there's nothing really strange about that, but what is strange is the fact that it's in dry dock. Now, when a ship is, or particularly submarine, is in dry dock for repairs, it's usually a long time for some serious damage to have been done. Now, what's also strange about this is it went all the way to Pearl Harbor. It could have gone to Guam, which was a lot closer, unless, of course, there was some kind of damage done to the sub that was beyond the capabilities of the facility in Guam to repair. Is it just a coincidence that a 110-meter 7th Fleet Guam-based U.S. sub, which regularly visits South Korea, just happened to need a highly unusual dry dock maintenance session 4,000 miles away from its home port right after the Cheonan sunk? Wouldn't have used so much effort to cover up a rogue ship. It seems very clear to me that this ship was very likely involved in the sinking of the Cheonan, even if just a very large accident, which is what I believe it was. However, this evidence has been given by these experts has been completely ignored by the media. No media is picking up on this whatsoever. I think when you combine all these things together and the fact that other experts cast doubt on the official story behind what the South Korean government says happened, that there would be enough certainly to at least pay attention. But isn't it funny how it's suddenly been decided that the DPRK engaged in the Sony hacking scandal right when this information came out? Isn't it weird how this really odd hacking incident, which doesn't have much substance to blaming the DPRK for it, just happens to come along at a time in which all of this information, scientific information, has come out about what is essentially the DPRK being falsely blamed for the sinking of a submarine? Isn't that kind of strange? I think this is generally one of those times where an opportunity just arose, just came up, that they could use, the United States and imperialism could use to attack the DPRK while covering up the actions of one of their own.